So, supply chain risk management. There's two very important aspects to this. Something has happened, a disruption. You walked in Monday morning, the disruption occurred. What is your company going to do? You're going to try to do everything possible to minimize the impact of that disruption, right? You want to stabilize the situation. So that's certainly very important. How do I do that very smartly with limited resources to minimize that impact? But there's another component associated with this as well, and that is being very proactive, where I'm looking at my operation, my end-to-end supply chain, and I'm saying, where am I vulnerable? And if that actually occurs, how bad would that really hurt? And what should I do about it to add resiliency to the operation? So being very smart and reactive, and being very smart and proactive. And learning as you go, because as we all know, the world is changing by the day, and constantly being able to update this in a way that makes sense for your company. Okay, as we talked about earlier, an event has occurred. It's your job to actually figure out how we can get through this as quickly as possible to minimize the impact and stabilize the situation. If you have 3% of your locations providing 80% of your profit, are you going to treat those customers carefully? Of course you are. So you're going to think about, all right, let's say that the tariffs are coming. You know that there's going to be an impact. And you say, for these particular customers, there are absolutely no reason to do anything. There's enough margin here. I don't want to disrupt the relationship. So I'm going to treat them no differently than I did pre-tariff. Okay? Or maybe it's the case that the tariff's going to influence the margin enough where you say, really what I want to do is just sell a little more product to you. Again, remember, this is 2,833 customers out of 110,000. Or maybe I do have to really consider very carefully very specific price and discount changes, but I'm going to do that extremely sensitively. What am I going to do about these guys? What am I going to do about the unprofitable customers? Am I going to treat them the same way as my really profitable customers? Absolutely not. Tariffs are going to be increased. Are they going to be even more negative? Of course they are, right? So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to try to do something to get them to move over, at least to being marginal. And if I can't do that, and I've got limited resources, I'm probably going to terminate the relationship. But that would be smart, because you only have so many resources to be able to apply, right? Well, let's go and look at another example, another company. In this case, we've got 1,100 customers, and we're going to have the same distribution that you see, where very few are adding the majority of the profit. Let's look at the products. You got about 20,000 products. But again, look at that. 500 are giving you 80% of your profit. So how can I combine that information to be smart? It's Monday morning, the event occurred. You're trying to figure out what to do. You only have so much time and resource to handle it, right? Well, first thing you're probably going to do, again, is look at those unprofitable customers. And look at that. 35 customers out of 1,100 are costing you just under $7.5 million and leaking $1.8 million off your bottom line. Would you want to do something about that if you only have so much resource? Of course you would, and you do it very quickly, right? What would I do next? Let's look at the customers and the products that are giving us the most margin on an ongoing basis. And here we have, out of all those customers, 200 and 400 products that are giving us 68% of our margin. Would I put resources on that first? Of course I would. Protect that as much as possible. And then look at the other products that those customers are buying. But that's where I would start. Okay, so that's reactive. Let's talk about proactive. All right, the event has not occurred. What you're doing is you're looking at your overall operation and you're saying, where could I be vulnerable? and how bad would it hurt? Where should I add resiliency to be able to minimize that risk? Okay, so we're going to switch gears from looking at customers, and we're going to look at suppliers. So, this is a company that has 73 finished goods suppliers. These are suppliers that are giving them products that are ready to be sold. You can see by the size of the dot, that's correlated to how much profit that supplier's products are providing your bottom line. And you can see that they're distributed, the suppliers are all over the world, right? That's an interesting thing to see if you're in procurement or looking at that. But how do we start to focus on the risk? The University of Tennessee issued out a report that actually gauged the risk considerations for doing business in different countries. They had 4 criteria for assigning these risks. The first was around the economic stability of that particular country, along with the political stability. They looked at the infrastructure. How much infrastructure is in that country that would support an operation? And they also looked at the competency, the business competency of talent in that area. Based on those 4 criteria, they rated 64 countries from 0 to 5. 0 means it is definitely at risk. 5 means it's a very minimal risk. So, if we took that and we looked at our suppliers, we would be able to gauge what suppliers that are contributing the most of our profit are at risk, right? And you see that big orange dot over there in the Philippines? Would you worry about that? That's contributing a lot of profit to you? Of course you would. So, let's say that we just want to look at the suppliers that are in a risk area from 0 to 5 of 2.25. Let's just pick that number. So now, instead of having resources to go after 73 suppliers, I'm now having resources focused on 17 suppliers that are in a high-risk area that I need to focus on. And those 17 suppliers are giving me about 44% of the overall profit contribution for all the suppliers. So that's a good thing to look at, right? But 17 could still be a lot. So how do I bring that down even more? I only have so many people, I only have so much time. Well, let's say that you have the ability to vary the index. I said 2.25, you can move it up or down, and let's say that you also could move how much profit you want to protect. But the key is you're trying to zero in on where it would hurt the most. So if you see this A quadrant, that means that these are vendors or suppliers that are in a high-risk area and contributing a lot of profit. And now I'm down to 9 suppliers. Is 9 suppliers going to be easier to examine than 73 suppliers? If you're focusing your procurement organization on where to go look to add resiliency, would you want to start there? Of course you would. So, all right, so now I've got 9 suppliers. So what would I want to know? Well, I'd want to know who they are. I'd want to know how much profit they're generating for us. The information that would be useful in starting to look at what am I going to do to add resiliency. Let's look at the number 1, top of the list. This is a supplier in the Philippines. They are contributing, this NLP is net landed profit. All right? So we can see that this supplier alone is contributing just about $2.8 million of profit. That would be a good place to start. Now, how am I going to think about that supplier? Where am I going to focus my energy to be able to mitigate risk associated with that supplier? Well, one thing I might want to look at is how much margin is coming from the products associated with that supplier. And of no surprise, because you've seen the distribution in other examples, we have very few products that this supplier is making that actually are contributing the majority of the profit. In fact, 51 products out of 586 products are giving me 80% of my profit. Now you have a procurement team. You're focused on this supplier. What are you going to do? Protect the 51 first. And you may choose to go over and look at the rest. Or you may say, let's look at the next supplier and see what the distribution is for that one and protect their 51, right? But it's all in narrowing the focus to apply the resources to mitigate the risk as smartly as you can.